got this next one, Veronica someone. This is the annoying thing with Vimeo transcribing. Let's see what Veronica's got to say. She does mention bits about solar.
Sorry, Helen.
Okay, thank you. So next we have is Veronica Culpan.
Sorry, this does take a little while to get through there because of Vimeo. It's not quite as user-friendly as the Parliament's website, or the one they use in the debating chamber.
Hello, Veronica. Thank you so much for your submission. We have 5 minutes with you. So if there is any time left after you have spoken to your submission, there might be questions from members. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing me today. And I was fortunate to catch the tail end of the last submitter, who sounded like he was well across a number of the issues, much more deeply than I am, I have to say. My position on the proposed bill is to object to it in its entirety. I am fundamentally against increasing the amount of our reliance on fossil fuels, and fundamentally against the reopening of otherwise protected areas to further exploration and raiding to generate wealth. Wealth is perhaps a good thing, but raiding and decimating our lands and our seas, and with the risk of contamination, when we should be transitioning and building a plan and putting in place a plan to transition away from our reliance on fossil fuels. There is opportunity, I think, for exploring more in the way of solar and wind, and we've seen such a movement over the last number of years where the technology around those solutions has just come along in leaps and bounds. And there's probably more to explore there. I mean, goodness knows that there really ought to be more to explore there with the great work that researchers and scientists and developers are doing in that space. And it would be fantastic to see some of the opportunities through where we've already got resource consents that have been granted to bolster wind and solar development on a system-wide level, so that the structures are beginning to come online to support a more resilient energy sector and for energy provision for the country. I am very worried about the speed of the process and the chance for people to submit. Now, I appreciate you are all incredibly busy people, but so are we, members of the public, who are losing track of all the very many changes and undermining of democratic conventions and principles, who we've got our day jobs and we're trying to juggle that in our busy lives and attend to Parliament to present on issues that are dear to our heart, but we're also struggling with putting food on the table at times and making sure some of our other commitments are met. And it's great to have the opportunity to speak, but the simple speed of this is very worrying from a democratic position. So I think that partly goes towards concerns around reputation of New Zealand on a global stage. We all know that 100% pure was a fabrication, a lie, but there was still this image that New Zealand was a relatively green country, that we were trying to do our best, even if we were flawed in our responses. Here we have, again, a further eradication of that idea of New Zealand as a green country. And I say green in a very wide sense, not as a political affiliation. We should be transitioning away. We should be putting in place structures and responses that help us to transition away from fossil fuels. And we should be putting in place the structures and maintaining the structures that allow for democratic involvement in processes such as this. So that is essentially my submission, and I'm open to any questions. Please don't ask me a technical question.
Thank you, Veronica, for your submission. And we have a question from Steve Abel.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. I won't ask you a technical question. And I think the thing you alluded to, I wonder if you can expand on, is the sense of appropriate democratic processes and how that dissuades people from faith in our political processes if if a government consistently puts through these highly truncated submission periods, very short hearing periods, only 2 days here, only 4 days, working days for people to make submissions. What effect do you think that has on the wider societal faith in so-called democracy?
Interesting question. I'd take a step back and I would look at where I think urgency has a role. And I think urgency has a role in situations like the Canterbury earthquakes, genuine emergency. It's not just Canterbury earthquakes, of course, the situation unfolding in Dunedin at the moment, if that becomes worse, or what happened in Auckland 18 months ago. I'm not actually entirely sure what the responses there would be, but urgent situations for urgent responses to urgent situations. This is a relatively conventional bill in the sense of it's relatively conventional in the sense of it's making some changes that have a political party in particular has petitioned people on through the election process and the like, without much in the way of meat on the bones of the skeleton of what they were proposing. And we have a process that over decades upon decades, if not centuries, decades upon decades have developed that allows people, and not just people such as myself, who's just Joe Public, right? But has allowed the democratically elected representatives, so on whether they're on the government side of the house or the opposition side of the house, to engage in a proper manner and to have the time to digest what is presented to them, to have time to gather the evidence and form their own views, and to look at what is in the letter of the bill and the law, because that takes careful consideration, care that I have not had chance to fully digest.
Veronica, sorry, I'll have to stop.
Now, just to address Frosty's question, why was there a woman outside on a deck? That's MP Helen White for Mount Albert.
She's lounging around on the job. She's working from home. What is she doing?
So, yeah, I thought that might be a good point to actually put up there, is that was Helen White MP, who may not always get a chance to always ask questions.
Right.
But that was an interesting part about saying about the, the constant use of urgency as a standard legislative practice.
That worries me a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the other option, and they've got a tool in the toolbox, it's called extended sitting days. It's another tool. It is effectively urgency, but not urgency, if that makes sense. It just means instead of doing, say, 4 to 6 hours worth of debating in the chamber, it goes up to, I think, 9 to 10 hours.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's you can't skip you can't go through all stages of the bills in one sitting day, because so extended sitting, you can only go through one stage of each step of the bill through the process, whereas urgency, you can go first, second, third reading and committee of the House all in one go, whereas extended sitting means, you finished this stage, it has to be on the order paper before you can actually go forward through on the next day. It's it's a little bit, it's has more better checks and balances in place.
My biggest concern around the submission process is that there doesn't appear to be a set minimum amount of time that's acceptable. Like, I would like to see these submissions given a minimum time frame, right? Whether you can take in submissions. I'd like to see that extended to 2 weeks, because people are busy. They're living their lives. They don't have time to do big in-depth research into things. And I think it's really important for the government not fast track that.
Yeah, 4 working days is what they were given. And in the case of this, like, the fact is, on Wednesday, we didn't know this select committee process was happening. I found out Friday morning.
Right, right. Well, could you see also in the sense that the current government is quite a hardworking one? I mean, if you look at the previous 6 years, they were always avoiding going to.
Yes, but they were never going into urgency constantly all the time.
Right.
Urgency, hard, you know, rushed legislation isn't called hard-working legislation. If they wanted to make themselves look hard-working and properly doing it, then they would actually sit down there and use extended sittings instead of urgency. And the fact that they took from the month of May right up until July, they had 1 sitting week. That's not a hard-working government. Whereas if you went for last year, each had the normal sitting weeks. It was 3 weeks on, 1 week off, which is the normal parliamentary sitting process. And then when it comes to school holidays, you have 2 weeks off, so you can have your MPs back in their constituency at the same time with the school holidays, so they can actually sit down there and see their constituents while looking after their children, that sort of thing. And also when points where parents and that where they tend to take time off at school holidays to look after the kids in place of paying for childcare. So whereas if this government of it's like we're not going to roster anyone onto work, and you say like, oh, we're all going to unpaid overtime, and that is not, to me, that is not actually doing things fast. That's doing things higgledy-piggledy, and it's not productive. It's like, you're trying to sit there and land 15 planes at Wellington Airport in a space of 30 minutes. It ain't going to happen with 1 runway.
I'd like to respond to Eric. Like, of course they're working hard. These are hard-working politicians. I'm not going to deny that they're not working hard. It's really hard work writing legislation.
But what about the labor filibusters? The labor filibusters.
Yeah, I mean,
well, there are so many urgency seatings because of the delays. And,
of course, and I have problems with that as well. But hard work should not be done at the cost of democracy.
True,
it's really important that people get to have a say. And you can do hard work, and you can do democratic participation in these bills.
And
I think that's really important.
Most bills, in a traditional sense, get 6 months from going between first reading for the select committee to do a process before second reading. In the case of this bill, it's going to report back to the House on the first sitting day in October, which I think is the 15th. That is a very short time for a very complex piece of legislation that should actually go through the 6-month full select committee process.
I think if I want to look at it this way, there is two valid perspectives, though they can be seen as opposing points. All right, now you have the side where in the rurals and regionals, right, where there are lots of good, hardworking Kiwi, Joe Blocks, and Maori people who are looking for work, and these mining situations, like you see, the so-called good mining, like lithium and all that, less pollution. I mean, if we can find it, hey, we might even find gold again. Well, we'll be very rich again, New Zealand. But hey, it's possible, hey. And it's less pollution like oil and gas. But so we can do it. If we have the ability, we can create jobs. So you have this balancing point. On the one hand, you want to create jobs. And so the current government is all about getting jobs and getting people into the jobs, good jobs, Kiwi blokes and all that, right? And Kiwi ladies, all right? So this is a good side of it. Now, then you have the balance with, I know, the idealism of the Greens and those who have very educated, like you guys, who have read like 13 books on health, environment, and preserving that health side. But we are talking all this from Wellington, from our safe caves, whereas these Joe Blocks in Mata, and I was working for 4 years, right, driving a car to all the hinterlands, rurals. And, it's so, sometimes you can see they are really hard done by, it's like really tough jobs and that kind of rural environment. So for someone like Shane Jones, he's thinking, okay, I have my constituency and those who support me, I'm there to get jobs for them. So on the one hand, we got to balance with the environment, which the health and safety standards already incorporated into our New Zealand rules and regulations pertaining to mining. I mean, it's not like the usual 80.
Well, they did screw up with Pike River, but that also didn't help when the number of mine inspectors in New Zealand went from 3 down to 1 the year before the Pike River disaster. I mean, I would sit there and say, if we're going to build up more mines and all that, we need to piggyback off our Australian cousins to have them be our mine inspectors, because they've got way more experience than what we have.
They've got stronger unions too.
Yeah, if we were to do more mining, we need to have a system in place where our Australian cousins have bring their inspectors over to check, so we're not having the same Joe Blow turning up at the place doing the inspections. You want different people there because different people pick up different things. I can tell you that from my business with health inspections. Every time I've had a change in health inspector, they pick up something different in the business. The worst one I had, not really, but was having someone who was a former barista, but with the coffee cup. Because guess what? He knew all the tricks that I knew.
Yeah, I mean, to speak to that, I mean, I have a background in forestry. I'm not some woke greenie sitting up in a white tower somewhere.
Education. You guys.
I mean, I know I can use a chainsaw. I mean,
but we can, education. Sometimes you can pontificate, and on the Jill blocks and Joe blocks in these farming towns that I drove, like 1,000 kilometers from Hamilton there, and then I'm going there to ask them, would you like to buy insurance? And my gosh, they're suffering, and you're asking them to buy. There's a moral.
I'd like to talk about insurance.
Yeah. So, I mean, the
price of insurance is going up due to climate change. I mean, you look at the flooding that's happening in Dunedin, the insurance rates has gone up. I mean, I feel.
We've got that in Wellington. There are some parts of Wellington
which they need mining jobs, Laura. I mean, they need mining jobs. Don't you think they need mining jobs?
I think, some of them could do mining jobs, but the other thing I'd like to say too is that I think the government can help people get into green tech jobs by providing subsidised education.
Or green
I think
mining
that's also
jobs?
really important.
Well, for the right, if you want to
mine in a green way, right? Can we mine in a green way? Can we do mining in a green way? Can we all agree on this? I mean,
I think there are actions that can be taken to make mining more environmentally friendly.
Yes. So we could do that.
It's also what's the product that's coming out of the mining is the big question.
Okay, most of the money I need to ask the question. Australia, isn't it? The mining that's coming in will be all the expertise will be from Australia and US. And all the rules.
Well, I mean, you look at their mines. I mean, isn't it? Queensland, their biggest export was coal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was our biggest mineral export. It is, because I remember Troy mentioning a week ago was one particular area that their solar energy uptake on there created so much power that they had to shut off coal-powered power plants in Queensland because there were too much solar going into the grid.
Too much, right. I mean, there are three countries that most likely will put money here, right? Canada, Australia, UK, maybe not the expertise. Okay, oil and gas, maybe UK, and then America, United States. So if these four people put money in, you can be rest assured they'll follow all the environmental standards. And, it's just like if one bad apple doesn't spoil a whole bunch of apples, right? So you have 50 West Coast mining places, and one fails because it was shoddy. The manager was putting something into his pocket, and then the whole thing crashes. Some miners die, which is sad, unfortunate, and it's wrong. And then we have a royal commission, remember, to look through it. Doesn't mean that all the mining places are like that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, listen. I don't have a problem with people who work in the industry.
Right.
I don't have anything against miners. What I've got against is how does this play when it comes to our emissions budget that we have to meet? How does this play when it comes to carbon tariffs that the EU are putting out? How's that going to impact our economy? So we've got to keep all this stuff in mind, and we do need to start taking steps towards transitioning to green tech. I'm not against the miners.
We can't please all the big countries. We got to get our energy independent.
We might not be able to to those countries.
Okay.
We could lose out on trade with those countries. That's really important because people are not going to buy products if the tariffs are there and causing inflation to go up. We saw the same thing in America, for example. Those costs were transferred over to customers. China wasn't paying for those tariffs. The customers were.
Exactly.
So that's really important to keep in mind. So
who was the smarty who signed off $15 billion from our taxpayer money to give for the emissions of China and India? I think it was Arden, isn't it? We don't have to do that.
Bill?
There was
I'll
a
have to look into that. I'm not
carbon
specific.
offset. It was
Yeah, that doesn't quite. Was
Let's
it?
look into the specifics for that. But
Yeah.
Yes.